A hush falls over the crowd. Well, welcome. This is the last of our monthly guest artist series here in the Ylvisaker Fine Art Center gallery. Guest is an interesting term. We have a very familiar face with us today, and I would encourage you to be determined not to know much about this man who seems so familiar to us. Spend some time looking at his work. Try to understand what's happening when he's making it. Try to understand his choices. Why does he choose these things? And something just occurred to me seconds ago looking at these artworks. I picture sitting in chapel, listening to Chaplain Moldstad, and very often he's telling us some anecdote from history or the news or a story that he heard and applying it. He'll pull something from what seems like everyday life, seems mundane, and then find significance in it. You look around at the artwork, he seems to be looking around at things that people overlook, back alleys, side streets, and finding something worth spending time with, worth our time and attention. So please give your time and attention to Chaplain Don Moldstad.
Thank you. Is this on? Yes. Thank you very much. My privilege to be here, and thanks. Feel honored to have so many of you here. I called this Alleys and Side Streets because a lot of times when I do my running and walking, I'll take the back alleys, and you get some interesting views of the city. And there's a piece coming up that I'll show you that actually got me kind of started on this, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So first of all, I want to thank my wonderful wife, without whom, yes, without whom I wouldn't be doing any of this. But what's interesting is when you marry a short man with short arms, all of your selfies look like you're the villain from the Batman TV series. So, and then also thanks to my sister and her wonderful husband, Paul. That's the only time I'll call him wonderful. But they have taken us on numerous trips around the world, been very generous for us. Some of the things that you see from other countries in my artwork is due to their generosity and kindness. So I am so grateful for all of that. I thought I'd talk just briefly about the history of the art department here at Bethany. Dr. Barney Teigen, back in the early 1950s, noticed that Bethany was sort of missing art classes and things and thought it would be wonderful to add that. And so he got in touch with a woman named Edna Buzakist, and Edna came here to Bethany, a wonderful Christian woman, and Edna became sort of the entire art department. She also taught home economics and English. She was a well-rounded, wonderful lady. And anyway, so Edna, when I was growing up as a child, my dad taught here, if you didn't know that. So I grew up around the campus ever since I was 6. And Edna was really art to me when I thought about art at Bethany. And she did a wonderful job building a program for a junior college at the time. She was getting at the end of her career when I came here to college in 1976, that fall. I still had her for an art history class. And following her, there were 2 years or so of other teachers they were wonderful people and had great strengths in certain areas, but it wasn't the things I wanted to study. They were good in like fabric and things like that. So anyway, this is an interesting picture. So I'll use my clicker, my red thing. This is my mom. This is my grandma Moldstad. She lived about a half block from me. This is my grandma Madsen. She lived a half block from me. They were neighbors and best friends. How many people can say that about their grandparents? Once in a while that happens, but they were both wonderful women. This is Harold Natvig's aunt, Gertrude, right? Harold's with us tonight. And this is Edna. Now I'm showing you this picture for a reason. Up on the wall is a Norwegian painting by a man named Gausta, who painted many altar pieces in Norwegian Lutheran churches. And I always remember being intrigued by that painting. But here's another funny story about this picture. So it has to do with Edna and my mom, okay? When I was excuse me. Which one here? Isn't that Edna Buzikist? Oh, I know Effie is here. Okay, I thought that was Edna. Okay, all right. I'm glad Harold's here. All right. So I've already been corrected on my second slide. This is going. That's right. Okay, well, pretend it's Edna. Okay, so here's what happened. When I was in about 6th grade, I did a drawing of, it was supposed to be a picture of Jesus on the cross. It was terrible, absolutely horrible. But for some reason, I saved it. That was a mistake. And a couple years later, when I was in high school, Edna came to my mom and asked her, do you have a drawing of Don's that I could use on, they were starting to do what was called the Bethany Report, I think is where that started. And Edna was going to get this started. Well, my mom dug through my stuff, and all she could come up with was this horrible drawing of Jesus. And I didn't know about this, and all of a sudden, this magazine showed up in our house, and it was just this most awful, pathetic drawing of Christ. And I was so embarrassed. So if you ever run across that in the archives, that's the story behind it. So, all right. From there, I went on to Mankato State University and studied under Paul Hapke and also under Bob Finkler and then Don Madding. Don Madding was really the primary watercolor artist that I studied under. He was a good friend of Bethany, I would say. I think when he retired, he donated some things to Bethany, and very nice man. Lived down near Turtle Lot Park area. So they were all, Finkler was really my drawing coach. He's the one that really taught me a lot about drawing. Paul Hapke was at the end of his career. He had serious heart trouble at the time and so on. And then we come to this loser so at the time I went to Mankato State, all of a sudden Bethany got Bill Bukowski to come here. I was all excited, but now I was out of school here, so I wouldn't have a chance to take classes from him. And then I found out he was a Packer fan, and I thought, well, forget it anyway. I wouldn't care. So anyway, but Bill's been an influence on me in other ways, and I think just with the passion and the desire to want to continue pursuing art and all of that. So it was about this time I came back, and I took my languages, Greek and Hebrew, to go back to seminary. And so the question was, in 1981, as I went to seminary, would my artwork continue? And I'm here to show you with the next slide that yes, it definitely would. Okay, my artwork would continue with my loving professor, Erling Teigen. He loved this. This was a series called Lutheran Bodybuilders, and so we had a good time with that. Trust me, seminary was a blast. We had a great time. Don't you ever think seminary's boring, any of you? All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the paintings. This one is up in Door County. I did this about 3 years ago. And one of the things that I always try to think about is where will people look first into the painting or drawing when you produce it? And we refer to that as a primary focal point and then a secondary focal point. So for me, I tried to make this, in my thinking, the primary focal point, and the secondary focal point was maybe more back here. And typically, and as you go around and look at things, and this is true of all artwork, ask yourself as you look at something, where does my eye go first, okay? And quite often the artist is intentionally trying to make that happen, trying to put more attention or focus, it can be in color, lines, whatever, on a place where they want you to look first. It's just something as far as how you view art that I thought was very intriguing, and to try and build that in. A lot of times a lot of my artwork is done on trips, vacations for me, and I quite often don't even have a place to stand and work. By the way, I've got a little sketch of the Vatican up here. That was done on the top of a garbage can. I hate to tell you, but I had to stand behind the garbage can as my desk. So a few years ago, Gina bought me a very nice chair to use for painting. It's got places for brushes and holders, and it's wonderful. So very portable. You can take it anywhere. So that's my little kind of watercolor kit. This is a scene of Lugano. This is in Switzerland, but almost Italy. Switzerland takes on whatever country it's next to. It takes on some of their elements, whether it's Germany, France, Italy. And this city, when you're in it, it really feels like you're in Italy, even though it's a Swiss city. But I just love the layout of the buildings. This was actually drawn and painted from a park on the other side of all this. This is another one from our Switzerland trip. This is in Lucerne. Funny story about this. Quite often I have memories about who talked to me while I'm doing these paintings. And this one, there was a family from India that was watching me paint this. And I mean right over my shoulders. And there was a boy who was probably 13 years old, and he kept asking me why I was doing things the way I was doing and making comments. It was all positive. It was all very good. But it's just funny the things you remember from the process of making some of these paintings. Anyway, just to interrupt myself, there is someone here tonight who had an influence on me in a certain way, and her name is Carol Lemke. Carol's sitting in the middle over here. I don't know if you can wave at least. So Carol's husband, Carl, was my 6th, 7th, 8th grade teacher at Mount Olive. And Carol would come in and do both music and art. And one day, this is something that kind of helped stay with me. One day, she asked me to draw, I think it was pictures of people's faces. So I drew a face and had the nose and everything. And I brought it to her. And she said, "That's good, but have you ever noticed," she said, "that there are no lines where my nose is when you look at my nose?" Because I had drawn lines for the nose. And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "How do you know that my nose is where it is and how it sticks out and things?" And I realized it was the shadows. And she said, "Draw the shadows." And that little comment changed how I looked at so many things I would start to draw. That to start to think in terms of shadows. So thank you, Carol. Yeah. This church, I'll see if I can take it back to that. You maybe saw this on the news, 5 years ago? 4 or 5 years ago, that beautiful old Trinity Church in downtown Milwaukee that caught on fire. I think they're still restoring it today. And anyway, about a year or two before that fire, I happened to be there from almost a similar angle and got a chance to draw it. This is significant to our family because this is my wife Gina's father's church from his childhood. This is where he went to church as a little boy. So some of these things have real personal, meanings for us too. This is another church in downtown Milwaukee. Gina's family's from Milwaukee, so we often go there for holidays and things. And they have so many. Milwaukee just has such beautiful steeples and churches. So it's hard not for me not to want to draw the steeples. A lot of Polish Catholics, German Catholics that are there, and they build great churches. They build beautiful churches. This one is kind of interesting because it started to sprinkle on me while I was doing the watercolor right out in plein air. And you can actually, if you look closely at the top, you can see little droplets that became part of the painting, little droplets of watercolor into it. So it's a literal watercolor in many ways. Yeah. This is whoops, I'm hitting my clicker too fast. This is another church on the north side a little bit of Milwaukee called St. John's. And this one I sat on a back sidewalk behind it. And had some very interesting conversations with neighbors as they would go by, and a group of about 5 or 6 children that were playing soccer nearby. So I always have these memories of the event itself, of doing the drawing and the painting. This was a church that the original synodical conference of the Missouri Synod, the Wisconsin Synod, and our old Norwegian Synod that ELS came from, those three church bodies first met in this congregation, not this building. This building was built later, but back in, was it 1863 or no, something like that. A very significant church and congregation from that perspective. This is a water tower this is near the Northwestern campus, near Chicago, north of Chicago. And I have to admit, with this one, there was a building off to the side, and I didn't like how the building turned out. So I took that off of the painting and reframed it because I felt that the tower by itself maybe had enough strength to hold up as a painting. So anyway, it's a beautiful, beautiful tower there. As you can tell, I'm drawn to steeples, towers, things like that. I just thought I'd show you a little bit of what it's like. This is a contour line drawing that I started of the back of the Blue Earth County Courthouse downtown. And to me, when I see this, it just evokes home and being in Mankato. But I thought I'd just kind of give you an idea of how you slowly start to build the depth to all of it as you move along, and finally get to the more finished product at the end. You always have to be you have to be careful with pen and ink, because you can possibly go too dark, and then you start to lose kind of the lightness of the image, and so that's always a concern. This is the side view of a church down in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We were again on vacation. I take a lot of vacations, by the way. So what I loved about this scene, I would walk by it every morning. What I loved about it was the light shadows from the trees that fell on the side and on the windows. And I thought, I got to see if I can try to get out and capture that. So that was kind of a fun one. This is a church, Red Wing, and one that after I had completed the painting, and you can judge whether or not this was a good thing to do, but after I completed the painting, I decided that to put a bold line, a dark ink line around all of the painted areas to try to set them off and highlight them a little bit more, and to kind of set off the architecture a little bit more as well. So that's, even though it's technically a watercolor painting, it does have a kind of an overdrawing of pen and ink on top. Whoops, there we go. This is a sketchbook painting I did probably in 15-20 minutes, just real fast. During a little bit of a snowfall, I was sitting in my car a couple blocks away from the St. Paul Cathedral. And I always thought, oh, I love the cupola on that and everything. I'd love to come back and do a painting of that someday. Well, we discovered that if you go eat at Casetta's, which is awesome, go eat at Casetta's, by the way. If you go eat at Casetta's, if you sit up on the top floor, there are these huge windows, and you look right out across the alley at the beautiful church up there at St. Paul's Cathedral. So last September, around the time of my birthday, Gina said to me, I want you to bring all your art stuff with us. We're going to St. Paul. I was like, okay, why? She said, because you're going to sit as long as you want at the windows there at Casetta, and we're going to get pizza first. And then you can do a drawing and painting of that, because I'd always wanted to do that. So I just spread out at this big table and had all my stuff there and started doing a drawing of the cathedral. Now, I'm going to show you again. I take pictures of the process, tried to kind of overlay them a little bit so you can get a feel for how this all worked. So I start out with pencil, and usually a light pencil first, and then I go into like a number 2 and work in some of the other buildings around. The unique thing with this perspective, and this painting, by the way, is down in the end here. The unique thing with this is the view I had also had this big brick building in front of it. And I was like, do I eliminate that or should I keep it in? I kind of like to keep as much of the reality of the setting in as I can. So I decided to keep it in. And you get a little, then I started getting to the painting. With watercolor painting, you have to work from light to dark, which I think is quite often the opposite with oil. Oil typically works from dark to light. You end up with your light colors on top. Watercolor the process is usually the opposite. You start with your lighter colors first and then work up. So just give you a little bit of a idea. Here's what's interesting. Notice what the color of the dome looks like right now. It looks so dark, doesn't it? But watch what happens to it once you build up all the other colors around it, okay? Just slowly watch what starts to happen. It starts to lighten up and has a completely different look once you have all these other colors around it. It's just kind of, okay, to me that's interesting. Maybe to you it's like, whatever. All right. I've always wished someday that I could be an oil painter. I just don't have the time for it or the place to do it. But and just with my job and everything, it just makes it difficult to do oil paintings. But I've always wanted to, as best I can, use the color depth in my watercolors to kind of almost have an oil painting quality to them as far as the richness of the colors. You can see the finished product on that. This is a Norwegian church. This was actually our Synod's church in Cottonwood, Minnesota years ago. It had a very boring neighborhood it was in, so I cheated and put it in a nicer neighborhood. But I've actually used this building for about 3 paintings now. It's such a beautiful steeple. So you can get a little bit of an idea again with starting with the clouds and all of that. I wanted it to have a feeling of coldness, cold air for the winter scene. And there's the final, I forget where this one is in here, but one of the walls back here. Yep. This was a little scene in Norway, and I just sat out on a little bench, and we were actually stopped on a little trip. I maybe had only a half hour to get some of the lines down. And people often ask me, do you use a straight edge ruler, when you do your drawings? I often start out with that initially just to get some of the main lines, but in my opinion, if it gets too straight edged looking, it just gets mechanical. It doesn't have the kind of a softness or feel to it. And so even though I might have some edges in there just to make sure I'm keeping with my lines properly, at the same time I kind of try to go back over things so that it looks more freehand in that way. This was a quick sketch I did and a study of the Marquette Chapel, downtown Milwaukee again. So this one actually came pretty fast, and you can maybe kind of sense that with it too. It's right across from the Al McGuire Center, Ron Young. You'd appreciate that. This is a sketchbook painting that I did, a large steeple that was being worked on in Switzerland. And when I got home, I just loved the scene so much, I wanted to figure out a way to turn that into a larger drawing. So this one I cheated with a little bit. I used some photographs too, but that's one that's hanging over on the wall here. I also cheated and took out the scaffolding. I wanted it to be completed. All right, this drawing is over on the wall as well, and I've had a number of people tell me they really there's something about the quality of this that kind of draws them in or whatever, and that was true for me. When I was a little boy, I would go down on my bike. This is right below Bethany here. I'd ride around in the alleys on my bike, and I would see this view quite often. When I got to Mankato State, the guy that owned our house that I was renting, he lived right next to this alley. So every time I'd go pay for our rent, which was about once a month, I would look down this alley at this shot. So it always intrigued me. There was something about it. But I wanted to show you some things, and maybe for those of you that are art students, could be you've already learned this already, but some things that are very helpful to me when I draw. You'll see the 2 eyeballs off to the side, okay? I always, first of all, try to establish where is my plane? Where is the plane where my eyes are striking this image? In other words, if you took me, I was in a car when I did this, it was in the cold, if you could take my eyes and move them straight ahead on a plane, where would they fall in this image? So to me, that's a very important starting point, okay? Then, is there an internal or external vanishing point? Now, I'm going to show you the one on this, and then I think you'll get it if you don't know. A lot of you art students probably know what a vanishing point is. So right here is the vanishing point, okay, that red dot. And I'll show you why that is. If you follow all of the lines of the house, like the slats on the side of the house and things like that, just watch where they all kind of line up. And it's not the front slats, it's the ones going back. Those are the ones we're looking at. So just notice how many things line up and make that the focal point. Now, I want you to notice it's not quite in the center, right? It's a little bit off center. And this is something that I learned in composition years ago. Be careful not to center everything. Sometimes it can work, depending on the subject matter, but have things a little off center. There's something in our human perspective and in our eye that likes the fact that it's not perfect. There's an imperfection to it or something that's appealing, okay? And also, sometimes try to leave certain areas that maybe are a little bit unfinished. And that engages the viewer to kind of complete that with their eye. Whether it's lines that you leave out. On this one, I left out some of the snow lines. And so, anyway, just different things that sometimes little tricks that artists try to use in their composition of things. Also, try not to let the lines go directly into your corners. That's another rule that they often try to teach you as well. Okay, enough of an art lesson. That's about the height of my art knowledge that I just gave you there. So, but anyway, I've always loved that. And then, of course, the beautiful church window at the back, too. This is a kind of similar scene in a way as in terms of vanishing point. The vanishing point is the dark tree way back between the buildings, if you will. And this one just happens to be right outside of our back porch. So in the winter, I could just sit at the back door with a big window and draw away. This is side view of the Roman Colosseum. And on one of the great trips to Italy, by the way, our art students, how many of you went on the trip to Italy? Woo, 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 yeah. Have you guys had enough art lately? Sheesh. So think of this. They all go to Italy for what, 10 days or 9 days or something. Jason took them over. They come back, and today they all went up to the Institute to see more art. And then they have to come to my presentation. It's like, well, at least put me first instead of at the end of all this. It's like, how do I compete with that? Well, anyway, this one always makes me think of on the trip that I was on, there was one woman on our trip that could not walk through part of the tour. So I kind of sat with her, took out my paints, and did a painting on this bench while the rest of them toured some of the ruins of Rome. So that's anyway, it was kind of a fun scene. All right, this is a funny one. Now, this is totally different than anything else, right? And there's a reason for that. I used to take 3 out of 5 years, I guess, I took a bunch of college and high school students over to Ukraine to teach vacation Bible school over there. And one year I stayed with this family, and they had a tiny little house. I mean, the whole house could easily fit right inside of this. And I was in this tiny little bedroom. And the church that they went to didn't have an altar painting. They would rent a certain room. And so I said to the pastor, would you like me to paint a little altar painting, of an image of Christ for you? Well, of course, they're from more of an Eastern perspective. So I thought I'm going to try to create something that has a little bit more of a Byzantine flavor to it. It didn't work. Trust me, this is not even close. But anyway, ask Bill, right, Bill? Anyway, I thought, well, I'm going to try. So I painted this, and I set the paint under this desk in this tiny room I was in, and it was sitting there just kind of drying through the night. I woke up in the morning, and here all the blue was just smushed around on it. I was like, oh, man, what happened? Did the paint run or what? So I was kind of bugged about it. I had to try and fix it and everything. I went to breakfast that morning, and their little dog walked by, and his tail was all blue. He'd snuck in the room during the night and did his own little painting for me. So I had to show you that just for fun. All right. Now, the largest work of art that I've ever created on Bethany's campus, however, was amazing. Here it is. This might have been Bill's first or second year here. We did a snow sculpture contest, and I'm still mad at Bill, and here's why. We got beat by some college students. We are seminary students. And the reason he said we got beat was because it wasn't intended to be for seminary students. Well, it didn't say that on the brochure, Bill. So anyway, in our Synod magazine, they took this picture with the professors, and they had the title, Stand By Your Man, under it. I thought that was pretty. Stand by your man. So, all right. Well, that's all I have for my little talk. And Jason was going to join me and pick my brain a little for whatever's up there.
All right. And also, I think we'd welcome any questions from the audience, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So at any time, let us know. Hands are already going up. Yes?
I'd like to know what kind of paper you use and what number.
Typically, I try to use rag paper, and typically there's a is it Grombach, I think is the name of one that I often buy. Trying to think of the other ones that I've been using lately. I have a nice block too. Some of these, I should explain, when you do watercolor, you can buy a block that has a seal around it so it doesn't warp and things. Yeah, those, I typically use hot press. No, cold press, and I do hot press if I want something that's a little more refined, but usually more of the, yep. Okay.
Want to have a seat?
Yeah, sure.
Could you walk us through what it's like to choose your location? Maybe pick one of these and just recount. What's it like? I mean, I think there's an infinity of possibilities that you narrow down to one in every case. Can you walk us through how you make a choice, where your point of view is?
Yeah, thanks. I maybe don't always get it right, but typically, once in a while, something will really strike you that you think, I got to do that. But typically, I might like the building and or something architectural feature about it, or how it plays off of the nature around it, and then have to there are a lot of things I have to try and keep in mind. Is there a place where I can actually sit and draw or paint? That's one thing. Is there, what's the lighting going to be like? What are the shadows going to be like? What will are there going to be things that are going to disturb my painting, like a truck going by all the time? Or I've had it happen a number of times where I sit down to paint something and a huge warehouse truck will pull up in front and just park there for half hour. It's like, thank you. So that's happened now and then. But I do a lot of these. I would say it took me close to an hour just to find the right view to paint from. The one over here from, I can't think of the name of the town anymore. It should be on there, yes.
Hastings?
Hastings. It's kind of the courthouse tower in Hastings. I wanted something that showed its setting among the neighborhood, but to try to find the right perspective on that took a while to, but I think that one, it probably took me a good 45 minutes to locate. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That's good. And when you say it takes an hour, I think that helps some people begin to understand. Yeah, maybe let's go with time. How much time could you just point at one? Point at one and tell us how much time you think that one took to execute after you found your location.
Sure. The one right behind you, which is from Door County, that one I worked on over 2 days actually, and I would say each of those 2 days I was out there a good 3 hours, so that's a total of 6. There might have been a few touch-up things I did when I brought it back home too. So maybe 7 or 8 hours total, I would say, for something like that. Now, with that one, for instance, I also did a quick pre-painting to just kind of get my lines and know roughly where I would be, how it would fall on the page, things like that. And that all has to do with picking out your composition.
Is this therapy or struggle?
My life is struggle. For Gina, not me. It's not struggle at all. No, this is relaxation, joy, fun. Even looking at them again and kind of thinking of where I was is a relaxing thing to me. So, I don't have to do this for a living, and I can just do it for the joy and fun of doing it. And to me, that makes it very easy to do, and yeah.
You don't do it for a living, but many are for sale, right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
true.
Just making sure that's clear.
When you go out and look for those scenes, do you already know that you want to do an ink painting or a watercolor painting, or does that, depending on what you see, does that determine what you want to do?
Yeah, good question. There are some where I directly, like quite a few of these, I directly thought about, I want to do this in pen and ink. I just think it'll come out better. I think the shadows will turn out better, or the lines or something. But then there are others where the colors involved, I can tell. The third one in the row in the back there is kind of a bigger one with the green trees in front of it. It's a cathedral, and that one, for instance, would not have turned out as well in pen and ink, but it has a vibrancy to it because of the colors. I think the one with the red roof on the church is another example like that. So, yeah. Sometimes I might do both. I might try to, in fact, there are a few of these that I'd like to kind of go back to some of those scenes and see if I could paint them now. So,
I have a question about
oh yeah.
watercolor. Is it forgiving? I mean, when you go from light to dark and then you go in and you try to do a touch-up, is it harder to do that than on an oil because you're going from dark to light on an oil versus light to dark?
That's true. I think most people who work in both mediums will tell you that watercolor tends to be a little more difficult when it comes to making mistakes. If you make a mistake, it's a little harder to kind of cover up. And there are things you can try to do to go back and correct things, but there are certain places where you go too far and you can't correct it. And don't ask me what they are, but there are a few in here where I look at it and I go, I went a little too far on something, but.
Are there some that didn't make it in the show because they just don't make the cut?
Oh yeah, definitely. Probably only one out of every, 5 paintings I do, I feel ends up being worthy of getting framed. So, by the way, if I can make a quick comment to the art students, okay? Don't be afraid of getting critiqued. That's how you get better. And parents, if you want to teach your kids or grandkids or whatever how to be artists, make sure you toughen up in them the ability to get critiqued and to take it that I didn't have. Angie, for instance, she couldn't take that. No. I'm kidding. No, but make sure that it's one thing to say, we're so into praising everybody's artworks. Oh, that's wonderful. And you know that it has mistakes in it, but you're never going to tell them because you don't want to infringe on their creativity. Well, infringe on their creativity. That's how they make a better one next time. But you got to do it gently and in a nice way. But I had some, yeah, that was my problem. Okay. But I think what I always loved about my profs at MSU is they would hit you hard. They would just say, hey, I'm sorry, this isn't going to cut it. And it made you really have to, jack up your game for next time. So you have to develop a tough skin and realize that every drawing or painting you do is probably going to still have mistakes in it. So then the key is, can I learn from that for next time? So.
Don, I'd like to critique your brief bio back here. I noticed that Martin Luther Academy was not mentioned, which was probably your 4 most formative years in beginning your art career.
Yeah, they didn't have art at all. So anything I did doodling in my books was, or like in choir with Paul, yeah. That's about it. Yeah, what's funny is I was often asked to draw posters and things, and by my classmates. So in a way, I kind of kept doing stuff.
Yeah, but that also reflected your largest work piece for the Butterfield Open basketball game, which we won't talk about.
Yes, I'll tell them what this is. So this is on MLC's campus, okay? They have this big wall up on the gym. And our basketball team was, I don't know if it was first round of the playoffs. I don't know what it was. It was a big game. Okay. And I made this huge banner. It was probably bigger than the doorway entrance here. And it was of a ram's head. We were the Rams. Patty and Paul will remember. It was of a ram's head, and it had a mean look coming at you with its horns, and it was dripping blood out of its mouth. And all it said underneath in red blood painted was, "Kill." So, anyway, somebody took a picture of it and made it into the New Ulm Journal. And I heard later from some of the professors at our Lutheran high school that there were some people very upset that this is how MLA was represented in our. So, I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
They didn't show up. Do your painting, as these are gathered here with many, many buildings in them, does the icon of building have a metaphor for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think the metaphor in it is not so much the building itself, but the antiquity of it and the care and design that went into the original architectural plans. One of my cousins was a very prominent architect in the Twin Cities, and he died young, Paul Madsen. And when I was a kid, he was about probably 8 years older than me. He was like one of my idols, just a wonderful guy. And I always loved how he appreciated the older architecture and was often asked in Minneapolis to renovate old buildings, to make them modern, but he always respected the original design that was in it. So there was always something from Paul, I think, that I appreciated in those kind of classical designs. So, other than the IDS Center, where's that? That's in here somewhere. Upstairs, I guess it is.
I was wondering, like, going back to, like, talking about, like, what you gained from this, like, emotionally, I was wondering if you feel any kind of difference when you create art of a place that you, like, visit every day, or that's, like, very, like, regular and, like, personal to you, versus when you're on, like, vacation and you just see, like, a beautiful building, like, is there a difference there?
Yeah, good question. Some of the ones from Mankato, there is a different level of seeing them, or, that it evokes something different in me a little bit. At the same time, seeing some magnificent steeples in, Switzerland or something, that has another level of, so there's a slight difference, I guess I would say, but yeah, it's a good question.
Ink and watercolor are very different. I'm just curious, like, what got you into those? Like, what?
Combining them? Yeah. Right, good question. Sometimes the line in the paint and in the color, the line between something you're painting and, let's say, the background, is so faint that in my mind and with my eye, I feel it needs some kind of line to help distinguish that a little bit. And more than likely, on some of these that include both painting and ink drawing, more than likely I went too far with some of that, I don't know. But to me, there are times when I look at it when I'm done. I usually do the painting first, and when I'm done, I think, do I think it would help this to add a little bit of a pen line on here? So it's kind of hit and miss, I guess. You be the judge whether it works, I don't know. Michael?
When did you stop drawing sports characters? Because earlier in your career, that's all you drew. And
My
it's
career.
one of my favorite pictures ever.
Yeah. So Michael's my cousin, and when I was little, this part of this is to show how my family encouraged art and drawing. When I was a kid, maybe 5th, 6th grade, I loved to draw like any of my cousin's favorite football players. Even if it was a Green Bay Packer, I would do that, okay? Or Leroy Kelly for the Cleveland Browns, or Gene Washington for the Vikings and things. So I would try to do drawings of them in their uniforms and all of this. And what's interesting is my grandma Moldstad, she had this certain kind of paper that it was kind of thicker than most paper, and she would save it for me. I forget how she got it or where it came from, but she would save it for me and give this to me to use as my drawing paper. So a lot of those drawings that I sent out to my cousins were from my grandma Molstad's paper stock. Yes?
When you say pen, what kind of pen are you using? Ballpoint, pen, or?
Yeah. There's a brand, I think it's called Micro now, that I've been using, and they have it at Blick a lot. It's what I like about it is it's a very sturdy ink that will hold up to light and everything. I made a mistake on a drawing years ago where I used 2 different types of black pen from 2 different companies, and I didn't think about the fact that the ink stock would be slightly different, and yet it doesn't show up right away, but it showed up in about 10 years. When I go back and look at that, I can look at it and say, this was done with one pen and this was done with another. And so that mistake that I made caused me to be very careful with always buying a whole bunch of pens and using them entirely from that stock for a drawing. So, yeah.
Have you done very many commissioned pieces of art?
I've done some, yeah. I guess I would say yes. I don't do it as a profession, so it's rare. Once in a while, when we're on vacation, I'll see a beautiful older house, and I'll do a painting of it, and I'll go up and offer it to them to buy, and I've had some people buy them, and it's kind of fun, helps pay for the vacation.
I'm going to jump in. So help connect the dots. You finished a bachelor's degree in studio art, and you're a pastor. Can you talk about that decision? Take us back to making that decision.
Yeah. Okay, so I had been blessed to have Christian education all the way from 2nd grade through my 2nd year at Bethany. Bethany was a junior college then. And then I went from there to Mankato State. And even though the professors I had were very good about the technical aspect of teaching me art, some of them very openly ridiculed my Christian faith. I mean, really in your face. To one extent that one of my atheist professors really ran you down for being a Christian right in class during the critiques. And anyway, it made me start to reevaluate, and question what I was going into and what I wanted to do with my life. So ironically, going to Minnesota State is what made me more appreciate my Christian upbringing than when I was in it here. And so for me, that started to get me thinking, well, maybe. So I went to the president of the seminary at the time, Bill Peterson, and I said, should I suddenly switch? I was in my end of my junior year. Should I suddenly switch now and go into a different major? And he said, get your languages, get your Greek and Hebrew, but still finish out your art degree, your Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. Ironically, some of the classes I needed, which were just in like marketing and things, were only offered once a year, and they'd often fill up. So I actually got done with my seminary studies before I had my degree done at MSU. I was kind of working on both. But then I went out vicaring. I had my degree by then. So I was just kind of, but he said, just go get it. Well, we know you're going to get it, and pursue that.
Follow up. Do you think being an artist informs the way that you're a pastor?
Well, yeah, I think maybe to some extent. First of all, I love history, and there's some really great history in the art world too, that often can make application into theology, preaching, and things like that. So that's one way. I really started to appreciate art history when I started going through the classes. So that's one way, but I think just the whole kind of creative process and visualizing things, maybe there's a connection with that. I have used my artwork to illustrate things in my classes. I've produced a textbook for my 2 freshman classes that I teach, and it's full of my drawings and things, partly because you can't pull things off the internet to publish on Lulu. But so yeah, I sprinkle it in here and there. I used to design bulletin covers for Mount Olive and things like that. All right, you've had enough of me.
Well, how about one more? One more from the audience?
Do you have a favorite of all of these that are here? Do you have a favorite, or is that like having a favorite child?
Gina's my favorite. She's a work of art. I don't know. I look at my drawings differently than my paintings, I guess. Probably the Door County one is one of my favorites, and I think the alley view of that church window is in the drawings would be one of my favorites. So I have to remember what's up on the top row up there too. So.
Well, thank you. That ends this portion